doesn't it?
At a psychiatric hospital where I was finding ways to facilitate movement experiences for teens and trying to find ways to support teens in embodying the emotions that they weren't able to verbalize. So I first started kind of playing with it there as like a social work intern and noticed that some things worked. And as my jobs as a social worker progressed, there were sometimes opportunities to keep exploring that. And then it was probably 12 years ago that I took like my first continuing ed course in some somatic practices that therapists could use. And then it was maybe 10 years ago that I took my first like therapeutic yoga certificate program. And since then, I've continued to try to learn more ways in which movement integrates in the therapy space. And sometimes that's as simple as like asking someone to check in with their body while they're seated on the sofa. Other times it's giving them actual physical strategies to re-regulate their nervous systems. And sometimes that looks like full-on movement or therapeutic movement in the gym that we have at work, where we're creating an hour where we utilize movement to support trauma recovery work, nervous system regulation. Sometimes it's just as straightforward as depression and anxiety management. So I've been gathering a lot of tools in the toolbox that for me as a dancer make a lot of sense, but as a therapist I'm seeing are really effective.
So to sort of flip that on its head, as what does movement do for you personally on the mental side of things?
So what movement does for me is what you and I have experienced in projects together. Like I am focused on a narrative that for me makes sense to share through movement, through film, through imagery. And I think that that's been a resource for me, like from the beginning. I think since I was a little kid, I was dancing out my feelings. And while I am a verbal processor, for me, finding movement or finding like a visual narrative to talk about the experience feels like the capstone or the final statement. It's the final draft. Like I'll talk through all my feelings all day, and Jeremy graciously listens to most of that. But like when I've arrived at the thing, that's where I like for it, when it's a big thing, I like for it to be captured in movement in my body on film. There have been a number of times in my life too where with some body trauma, for me going to an improv jam session was the way in which I worked it out. Talking to a therapist I knew was not going to regulate my body, it was going to activate the trauma more. So going and moving in a way that I didn't have to verbalize, and moving in a way that was witnessed by or shared with other dancers in an improvisation context was very healing, very grounding.
I certainly have found on the movement side of things that if I'm stuck in literally any aspect, if I move my body so that my heart rate is elevated for X amount of time, if we're just talking about walking, like for me, like that needs to be minimum 4 miles, which you could probably do it even faster. But at my height,
is that a tall joke?
Yeah, that's a tall joke. I can walk a pretty decent mile.
I believe it.
You probably could go faster, but like all of those areas where you're stuck.
Yeah.
By the time you come back, not stuck anymore. Even if the unstuckness means I recognize and accept that there isn't going to be a solution, and I just have to be cool with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Movement coordinates the brain, lets the midbrain process the emotion, the memory, allows for the language center to find words to describe the experience. And just movement clears cortisol, which means we are getting out of fight or flight. And when we're getting out of fight or flight, we're more likely to be able to verbalize things.
I wonder.
I've not considered that as a confessional strategy. We are parents to a teenager.
Right? Yeah, you might.
You keep it in mind.
I need to keep it in mind too. Completely separately related.
Yeah, if you feel like you're gonna get in trouble for something, just make sure that you're like, no, I have to sit down.
I need to sit down.
Yeah. I just need to.
When Anna asked me to go on a walk, it might be a trap.
Yeah.
All right, good.
Yeah.